Hello, everybody. Greetings. I am Jenny Guy. I am Mediavine's Director of Marketing, and it is Thursday, December 5th. We are in the final weeks of this decade. If you needed to hear that out loud to you today, if you didn't, I apologize. I still find it traumatizing when I say it. And amidst all the madness of Q4 earning, all of us forward thinkers like you, audience members, are thinking about getting prepped for Q1. And one of the biggest topics that is coming up in all these Q1 discussions, especially around these parts, is a big thing happening in California called the CCPA, or California Consumer Privacy Act. Another acronym is what I all know that we wanted for the holiday season. I understand it. I mean, in my mind, it is the US's version of GDPR, but is that actually what it is? What do we need to do about it? Is there a Hallmark holiday film written about it yet? I don't know. As with all things complex, we have at Mediavine brought in the experts to help us muddle through. Today, I've got the man, the myth, the CEO legend, Eric Hochberger. Eric, welcome.
Thank you. Always fun to be here.
Yes, we love having you. And I have the founder and CEO of #Legal. She's been making legal sexy since the early 2000s. My friend and yours, Jamie Lieberman, Esquire. Jamie, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, let's just jump in and let's start with the legal talk. Jamie, what is this? Why do we need another acronym? Tell us what this is.
So it is a new law that was just passed in California. It doesn't go into effect until January 1st, but we are all preparing because it impacts data collection and data sale to California residents.
Those are trigger terms for all of us who lived through GDPR and create content. Okay, so Eric, talk about it. What is it in terms of what we do at Mediavine?
So the IAB, which is the Internet Advertising Bureau, that kind of self-governing kind of entity for advertisers, has determined that CCPA will apply to digital advertisement, that it is being seen as the sale of personal information, and so therefore CCPA will apply. So ads are going to be impacted by this. So we're going to have to do what we kind of did for GDPR and help our publishers make sure that they can stay compliant when it comes to their advertising.
Okay, guys, just a quick reminder, if you have questions, you're watching and you have questions for us, please post them in the comments. We will do our best to answer them, with the caveat that this is all a little bit murky and is not happening yet. So we're trying to make predictions about this thing that's happening and what's going to be changing as we move forward. And that's kind of my next question. We have a blog post. If we can go ahead and post that. Courtney Odell is posting comments to us in German because she is in Germany right now. Good. I'm not going to do that online on air, Courtney. That's not happening. I'm not reading that. So my next question, and we're going to post that blog post that we just released today about this whole law and how it's impacting us, with some help from Jamie, Eric, written by Eric, is that this law, the language, it's kind of loose. It's a little bit vague in my mind, and it makes it hard to be specific. So Jamie, why is it so vague, and are we ever going to get clarification on it?
Lawmakers would not like to hear you say that.
I'm sorry, lawmakers. All you lawmakers watching this live show, sorry.
So the language of the law will not change. It is going to remain as it is. However, what happens when a bill is passed is there are often regulations that are passed by the Attorney General, because this law is being enforced both by the Attorney General of California, and there are also actually potential private causes of action from private litigants. So California residents who have allegedly been wronged in some way related to their personal information. And so in order for companies and businesses, because that is the language of the CCPA, it applies to businesses, and there is a definition for what a business is that would the CCPA would apply to. Those businesses that need to comply with these, the Attorney General will essentially be putting forth regulations that will explain how the Attorney General plans to enforce the law. And right now, those regulations are proposed and being commented on, and won't be, I believe, commenting ends tomorrow. So without those regulations, it's really difficult to know how the Attorney General is going to look at the law and interpret those provisions, such as what is personal information, what is a sale, what is collection, things like that. So we have definitions in the law. It's just not clear how they're going to be interpreted.
Okay. So really all of this boils down to the fact that I need to watch, was it Schoolhouse Rock that did the bill that was sitting on the top of
Capitol Hill,
just to make sure that I understand this whole process.
Okay, that's actually a federal law, by the way.
Okay.
This is a state law.
Well,
sorry, guys.
Great. Schoolhouse Rock, call us up, make a new video, update your stuff. Okay, we have a question from Christine Cook. She said, I assume we will need to update our privacy policy. I purchased mine back in GDPR time. It was a dark time, Christine. We were all there. From #legal. Will there be an update to include the CCPA info?
So the answer is #legal didn't sell privacy policies unless you had them custom made. There was another company that had sold privacy policies. And so for this one, I don't know, I'm not affiliated with that company, so I don't know quite what they're going to be doing. For CCPA, it's a little bit different. And so it's harder, I think, to buy like a template. However, there are some checklists that you can go through because it's going to require a lot of auditing on the parts of publishers to look at what kind of data they're collecting and what kind of service providers, which are essentially the data processors under the CCPA, because the terminology under GDPR and CCPA is different. And so you have to look at who's collecting, how you're collecting data, what data you're collecting, how you're using it, and how those service providers or the people who are collecting it, like your mail provider, Mediavine, the people who you're utilizing or the companies that you're utilizing are doing with that data as well. So a template is a little bit challenging insofar as each website is different, how you collect and data, and whether or not any data collection on your site would result in what the CCPA calls a sale.
Okay. So just to take a little bit broader view, who does this impact? Is it every single publisher who is on the internet monetizing? Is there anyone who is exempt from this? Get out of jail free card?
This is a great question. So we have to think about it a little bit more narrowly with everybody. The first thing is this only applies to California residents. So if you're sitting in Nebraska, this does not apply to you. You do not get these protections. So you're really worried about California residents. So if for some reason you do have to comply and there's a whole bunch of things you need to do and a Nebraska resident gets mad, they don't have a cause of action. So let's start there. So this is just for California. Sorry, I didn't mean to pick on Nebraska, but so this is just for California residents. That's who is getting the protections under the CCPA. And so then essentially what the CCPA is saying is it affects businesses, and they've defined businesses. So it's a for-profit business. You have to do business in California. Doesn't mean you're sitting in California. It could mean that you have a website that reaches California residents. And then you are a business that controls the collection or processing of personal information for California residents. And then you have to meet one of these three criteria. You either have an annual gross revenue larger than $25 million, you buy, receive for commercial purposes, sell, or share personal information of 50,000 or more California residents, which I think is where a lot of people who are listening are probably going to fall in, or you make 50% or greater annual revenue from selling California residents' personal information. So if you meet one of those three, then yes, you would likely be a business that must comply with CCPA.
Okay. So then that brings us to, you were saying that with GDPR, it seemed there was a little bit that publishers had to do that applied to our content creators, but not as much. With this, you're saying it sounds like there's more impetus and need for our content creators to take action on this one.
Well, I mean, the first thing is you're in the United States. And so by its very nature, you probably do have quite a few California residents coming to your website. I think this is just the first of many. I think this is a trend, and I think many other states are going to be passing privacy laws like this. It isn't a bad thing, and I think I said this a year and a half ago in GDPR, to know how you collect data. And to know what the plugins or the service providers that you're working with are doing with that data. Because many of them, people don't realize, they sell data that they get from you. And so it's really important to investigate the plugins that you're using and the third-party providers that you're using to make sure that they're not doing that. Because in this law, it's all about the business. And so the businesses are the ones that are really on the hook and who are responsible for knowing how they're collecting data, even if they're not the ones doing it, even if one of their providers is doing it.
So as a content creator that has installed, let's say 25 plugins on my site, what do, Eric, don't cringe. What if I have 25 plugins?
Only 25. I'm actually proud of you, by the way.
Oh, you're proud of me?
Yeah.
Well, it's probably because I'm here in Nebraska and we only have 25 plugins in Nebraska. So what do I do? How do I find out how they're collecting data? What is my step? I mean, we can take, and Eric, we're going to talk about the Mediavine, what we're doing in a moment, but what do I do about all this other stuff?
Well, first you have to look at what personal information means under the CCPA. I think that's really important because we sort of assume, but this is one of the things I think Jenny was alluding to when she was talking about is how broad it is. Personal information as defined under the CCPA is defined really, really broadly. It can be your typical stuff like name or email address, but it can also be IP address and geolocation data and browser history. And there's like a whole laundry list that I'm not going to read, but is easy to find out. And so one, knowing whether or not the information or the data that's being collected is personal information. And if so, each of those providers needs to be telling you what they're doing with, because presumably you're entering into an agreement with that's what the CCPA is calling a service provider. And that service provider is supposed to tell you what you're doing, what they're doing with that data so that you can tell your users what you're doing. And this is why the template is so difficult, right? Because every service provider is different. Sometimes it's really hard to figure it out. Some of them are really forthcoming, like you guys, where you have the resources, everything is set, you tell everybody what you're doing, but not all service providers are like that. So it can be a little bit challenging sometimes to figure it out unless you're digging through terms and conditions, which nobody wants to do but me. So that's why I think it's really important to at least have that conversation so that you can sort of look at what each of your service providers are doing. And maybe that means you're going to get rid of some of those plugins or providers that you're using because they aren't be as forthcoming. We're going to push for this, Eric.
Yeah, plugin self-audits are something we advocate all the time anyway. And especially, so this is just, and I don't know if this is a question that you can even answer, or Eric, or anyone who's listening or watching, how would you, if someone is not posting something on their homepage or doing what we're doing as Mediavine, saying, hello, this is what we are doing, here it is, read our blog post. What if they're not doing that? Do you start calling their customer service? Do you start, is that where you start?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd ask, you know, how are you affected by CCPA, and how are you CCPA compliant, and what resources are you providing?
When does this need to be happening for everybody?
So January 1 is when the law goes into effect. There is a grace period for enforcement by the Attorney General. I think right now it's July. That could change, and that's not set in stone, but that's what is really being said. So I think it's fair to say we have time, but I wouldn't wait till the last minute. I would definitely be spending time looking. I mean, it's a great thing to do in Q1, right? We all want a fresh start. You sadly reminded us it's a new decade, make us all panic. But, you know, I think it's a really good time to audit. The CCPA, another requirement is you have to do this every 12 months. So if you have to comply with the CCPA, you need to be updating and telling your users, you know, there's a whole host of rights that's California residents get under the CCPA, many of which are just notice provisions, things you have to tell your users. And so you should make it a good practice to review and revise your privacy policy every year anyway, just to make sure that it's up to date.
Love that. Okay. Rob Freund said, if a business receives information from 50,000 California residents, the CCPA applies. How is a business supposed to determine whether their website visitors are California residents? People use VPNs, etc., to mask their location. Who would have the burden of proof under these circumstances? I just asked the question, so home friends. I just sit here.
I'm going to have to defer on the tech people on that one. I mean, I feel like I wouldn't, if you believe, and if you have an honest belief that you are probably getting, you know, visitors 50, like, just comply.
It's probably better just to
be on the safe side of complying. It's really the majority of what is going to need to be done are going to be notice provisions. So I don't think the burden is so high, and I'm not sure there are going to be that many visitors to websites, and maybe I'm wrong because I'm just a lawyer, who are masking their locations. But I think that, you know, review of your Google Analytics and and however else you track the visitors to your site should be able to at least give you a ballpark as to whether or not you're in the range. If you have 49,999, I would just comply.
We also, plus, like, you don't want to get to a point where you're sitting there going, gosh, I hope people from California don't come to my site.
Yeah.
Because as you said, it's going to expand in terms of impact. And that was my last question, which you jumped, Jamie, thanks. But about what the impact is going to be across the United States, and how this is not going to be an isolated incident. This is going to continue expanding. So the best course of action is to get in compliance now. And we probably won't know what's going to happen until someone who owns a business gets sued, and then someone tries to go to court and say, but I didn't know there were VPN masking locations. We won't know until that happens. So hopefully no one will get sued. Okay. Maria Ushakova says 50,000 are by year California residents or by month California residents?
Year.
Okay. All right, Eric, what is Mediavine doing about this to protect our publishers from our part in this process?
So I think we're going off the assumption that if you qualify for Mediavine, more than likely you're going to have 50,000 California visitors a year. So we're just going ahead and introduce this solution for all of our publishers, whether there's VPN users or not. It just comes down to US is generally 60 to 80% of traffic for most of our publishers. And yep. California is by far and away the largest state contributing to that. So most people have probably 10 to 20% of their traffic is coming from California. So it's something that we're going to try to help solve, by the way, whether it's 25,000 or 50,000, whatever your number is, we want to make sure that you're compliant, especially when it comes to the ads. So we're going to be introducing a CMP, or consent management platform, similar to what we did for GDPR in the EU. But this time around, it's going to be, I think, or we're hoping, less intrusive because the requirements are a lot different. This time around, it's a opt-out instead of an opt-in. So if you remember, GDPR is an opt-in. So when you get to any one of the Mediavine sites in the EU that are running our CMP, there's a big pop-up before you can do anything on the website because you have to opt in to data collection. This one is an opt-out. So hopefully, we're going to allow people to be able to use your site without stopping them, and then allow them to opt out at any time via a clear notice that we're going to provide to the user. So we're going to be offering a CMP. Hopefully we'll have that able to be previewed in the coming weeks before the January 1, and certainly before July or June, whatever date you gave, Jamie, of when enforcement is going to start happening. So our plan is Jan 1 is like, we need to make sure you have this solution. We're not waiting until the last minute. And it's going to be I can't remember the name of what the IAB is calling it, but I think it's the US API framework this time. It's not a great name.
The limited
the last one was
provider.
Yeah, there's some sort of fancy word. We're going to be complying with the standards. The standards set by the IAB are going to be who our SSPs and ad exchange partners are going to be looking for, that, whether the user opted in or opted out, for us to be able to pass through. So we're going to be complying with that standard, and a lot of similar to the kind of EU solution that we did with the other CMP. We're going to allow publishers to be able to use this to tie in via that same API to hopefully be the only solution you need to use as a publisher.
Okay, so that happens, and then what in addition do I need to do? We've already talked about the fact that you need to review your plugins and find out what is happening. And then what about your privacy policy? We've talked about that a little bit too. How do you recommend going about revising and revisiting your privacy policy for 2020?
So you're going to want to obviously go through and figure out what personal information you're collecting, the source, how it was collected, where it's stored, when it's deleted, which might be, you really relying on your plugins and providers, how you use it, whether or not any of it's sold, and your providers may need to tell you whether or not what they do with the data is considered a sale. And the age of the consumer is also important because there's some consent requirements there. But I don't know that that's a huge issue for many of the audience members. If it is, we can talk about that separately. And so your privacy policy is going to need to be updated in a few ways. You're going to need to have a California specific section where you talk about all the rights that a California consumer gets. You're also going to need to have a list of the categories of personal information you've collected in the last 12 months, any that you sold or disclosed in the last 12 months, You're going to need two methods that consumers can actually submit requests to you. One of which the law says has to be an 800 number, which I know is going to make everybody lose their minds, because who has an 800 number?
No one talks on the phone.
Yeah. So
can they text you? No, I'm kidding.
I'm curious to see how that's going to change, or how many people are going to comply with the 800 number, but at least two methods, I would say, even though the 800 number is said that you need to do. And like I said, a description of what the consumer rights are. You also need a notice of non-discrimination, which essentially says that if someone does exercise their rights under the CCPA, that they will still get the same level of service, that there won't be any increase in cost, and all of those things. And if you do get requests from someone under the CCPA as a business to either access their data, delete their data, there's the do not sell, which Eric was mentioning, because that's a whole other part. Because if you sell personal information, which, like we talked about, is a very broad definition of what that means, you're going to need a clear opt-out, and that's what the CMPA will be great. The CMP will be great for Mediavine for the ads, so that there's a way to opt out and you can be in compliance with that. And there are rights that you have as a business. If someone does send you a notification with any of those requests, you have the ability to verify them to make sure they are actually a California resident. You have 45 days to respond. So there are rights that businesses do get. And, if you, like I said, if you have any questions, or if you do get a notification or you're not sure, I recommend that you just talk to an attorney who has an understanding of this, who can help you with your specific situation, because I just don't think it's a one size fits all.
So I think something interesting real quick about that is that you mentioned is the aspect that you can't discriminate against those users, because that was something that a lot of people wanted to do. I know with GDPR and these consent management platforms, if they don't consent, don't let them go to the website. And that's like a great point, that we can't do that. That's not even allowed under this law. Again, second time around, like you have to still provide the content.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if we get our privacy policy in order and we have the Mediavine CMP on there, what happens if somebody refuses or denies, Eric, if they opt out?
So again, we're going to be presenting this in a very obvious way to users, so that they know exactly how we're collecting data, or I guess the sale of personal information, which is what advertising, again, is being construed as, or at least interpreted right now. So if they opt out, what we're going to do is similar to what we do with GDPR. If a user opts out of the sale of their data, we're going to serve non-personalized ads. Basically, the ad server goes into a kind of a limited tracking mode. This is a feature that Google Ad Manager, which is the ad server we and pretty much the entire internet uses. It goes into like a mode where it doesn't track as much about the user, as little as possible, to facilitate the sale of that ad, so that there's no personal information being sold. So non-personalized ads, basically. More lower quality, unfortunately, but more contextual, I would say, advertising, as opposed to advertising that's more programmatic and geared towards the user.
And that sounds like money might be coming into this equation at some point, Eric.
Yeah, so unfortunately, non-personalized ads do not pay as well as personalized ones. The entire beauty of programmatic advertising and why we all do so well is because advertising is able to be geared towards the user, and therefore is more valuable to the user and to the advertiser, right? I can show advertisements, making sure I'm not targeting you by entire wrong, like, I don't know, gender, if I can't even show an ad to you. There's a lot of products that aren't even eligible for me that I might get advertisements for as a result of this. So non-personalized ads means you're going to get limited advertising that people are willing to pay and run. And again, this is similar to what we saw with GDPR, right? If people that opt into our CMP and users that consented, we actually saw an increase in CPM. The users that opted out, there's a decrease in CPM. It can be as much as 50% lower if you're not serving personalized ads, unfortunately.
Okay, so then I'll ask the big question is, what do we think this is going to do to overall earnings for our publishers, Eric?
So I think we thought the sky was falling with GDPR, and it would be the end of, especially some of our UK publishers that get traffic exclusively from like the UK. I'm thinking of one in particular, but a lot of our EU publishers thought it was going to be the end of their business. And they ended up making more because of the CMP that they're running with us. We saw, I think, CPMs go up like 9%, increases in fill rates, because a lot of people don't offer these solutions. And therefore, they're just going to blanket serve non-personalized ads to California users. Because Mediavine offers this solution, you're going to be able to take at least a subset of your users and still serve them personalized ads. And if you otherwise, you'd have to opt out completely of personalized ads for them to make sure you're compliant. So we're going to help you create basically a more limited supply, right? There's not as many people opting in to serving ads this way. Therefore, there's less supply. Economics, I believe, says less supply, you get paid more money, basically. So in the end, you can end up making more money as a result of CCPA if you're compliant. It doesn't have to be a bad thing.
It doesn't have to be a bad thing. We can't tell you what it's going to be because we don't know yet. But with GDPR, and actually, can we go ahead and share GDPR at 3 months? That actually was the refutation. We all thought it was it was our Y2K. We all were there. Horrible things were going to happen when GDPR came into. We all thought we were going to lose all our money and our lives and be in the streets. And it did not happen. It was fine. GDPR actually ended up being a pretty good thing for a lot of people, so that we have some data to back that up in our GDPR at 3 months post. I also wanted to say that if you're struggling like me with yet another acronym, in order to remind myself of what this is called, have been singing CCPA, and it's been helping me a lot on my daily basis of knowing what. So if you're struggling with what you need to remember, that is my gift to you. Merry Christmas. Andrew Wilder says, Jamie, she's laughing really hard at me. I'm sorry, Jamie. I told her that I might do that. Jamie, please put me in your queue to update my privacy policy. So Andrew is trying to get in on the ground floor of this. And that brings me to my next question, which is, if I need help with my privacy policy, where do I go?
Sure. I would talk to a lawyer who has an understanding of CCPA, who does privacy law. I think is pretty important, not just sort of anyone. So ask around, see if you can find somebody who has experience and expertise in navigating these types of laws. I know I've spent the last week reading endlessly with many people checking in to make sure that I'm eating and drinking. And I was, and I'm fine. But make sure that whoever you work with, at least chat with a lawyer, make sure that you feel comfortable, that you have a good handle on it, and that you know how you're going to comply and update your privacy policy. I think is a good way to go. I put out a little free checklist. I think you guys, like an FAQ, I think you guys posted it in the blog post that you said. So if you guys, need a little bit more information, you can check that out as well. Totally free. You don't have to sign up for any mailing lists or anything. So,
yeah, it's important that we have these free resources are great. Let's actually share that link, please. And thank you. Maria Ushakova says, is Create going to have an opt-out option for the Amazon links in the featured product section?
Is the Amazon links part of this? I'll have to consult with our lawyer to find out. And if so, we'll make sure that Create and Grow are going to be CCPA compliant.
All right. Fantastic. That was a great.
So if it's required, they will be. Right. We'll take care of it.
We'll make sure you're legal.
Well, we can't make sure of that, but.
Right. Sorry. It depends. With your ads, we will make sure if it's a Mediavine product, we will do our best to mitigate. I love to use the term mitigate when I'm talking with Jamie, to mitigate those differences. We'll share that hashtag legal link as well, so you can grab that free checklist. So just kind of to wrap things up, next steps are get that checklist, talk to somebody to help you update your privacy policy, get that in place early. Don't wait, even though we have some time here. And then also this Mediavine solution is coming within the next few weeks. People will be able to have that and know that the ads are taken care of with CCPA. So that is all handled. In addition, is there anything else? Just a final thought before we run off. Whoa, earbud noises.
These new AirPods are terrible.
That's rough. It's rough. What do you guys think this is going to be outside of California soon? Like, are we going to be dealing with this on other states fairly soon?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think the federal government at some point may step in as well. But I think we also have to see what happens.
Schoolhouse Rock thing will apply.
I think we have to see what happens in 2020, to be honest. But yeah, I think it's the trend. I do. California is always ahead of the game on all of this stuff, whether it's employment stuff or privacy or resident rights. But I think there are other states that are not as progressive, but close to as progressive as California, and I think those states are not far behind.
Electing movie stars, they're on it. Electing Terminators, they were way ahead of that on that trend. Eric, what about you? What do you think we're going to see in 2020?
Yeah, no, privacy concerns are not going away. They're only getting bigger. I think obviously they're becoming part of like mainstream. People talk about privacy. People were not talking about privacy 3-4 years ago. After kind of the Facebook thing, it's become front and center. I don't know if there's Silicon Valley fans out there. It's literally this season's topic. I mean, ethics here, right? We gotta make sure that we're doing our part. And I really do think that privacy is not going away by any means. I know it didn't pass in New York, right? That their privacy law, speaking of other progressive states, but I mean, it's going to come back. I think this is here to stay. The EU and the GDPR was not like a fluke. People care.
Agreed.
People do care. And I think we've summed it all up really, as Eric said, ethics here.
He said tactics. If you watch Silicon Valley, that was an excellent reference.
I've never watched it. You've been recommending that to me for a while. I know. Final question. Michelle Palin says, will this pop-up only show for California visitors to our site, and will it show up every time or just once for them? Eric.
So the way we're doing this, again, is similar to the same technology we use to detect if a user is in the EU for GDPR, and that is through the CDN that basically serves our script wrapper or serves our technology, does the detection at the CDN level to figure out, are you a California user? We can't obviously know, are you a California resident? That would be very creepy of us, and I don't know how we could figure that out. But we're basically going to target it towards just California users. That's the best we can unfortunately do. It will definitely not be running in the other 49 states until we have to. It will not be running in other countries. This will be targeted towards California. As far as we'll only show once, I believe we have to show it every year. Are there rules of that? As far as when a user opts out, they won't get asked again for another year. If the user dismisses it, likely the same thing. They won't get asked for another year. It's going to be that kind of stuff is still up in the air, how that is going to play out, I think. It's very tough to know 100% if, how we can stay compliant. But that's what we have to make sure we're going to do.
At minimum, users will always have to be, even if, however the pop-up or however the CMP is dealt with, no matter what, a user's always going to have the ability somewhere to opt out of that data sale. It's just, if they do opt out, you can't ask them for another year to opt out again.
You can't change your mind.
Right.
You can opt back in, I guess. I'm not.
Is that a common thing? I don't know if a lot of users opt back in, but
just kidding.
I changed my mind.
Change my personal information.
Track me everywhere.
So the same thing that we do with the GDPR CMP, if they go back to your privacy policy, they're always able to change that after the fact. We're going to make sure it's the same thing with this. So if they do actually want to opt back into the sale of their personal information, they will be able to. Exactly.
If I lost,
maybe they're missing good quality ads.
Maybe they'll miss the good ads.
Yeah, that's what I think. I've heard that a lot. We hear that often.
I buy some good stuff from some targeted ads.
I do too. They work. I mean, they work. Okay, I have a question. This might be for Jamie. Carol Ann says, so bottom line, we all need to hire a lawyer. Question?
That's totally up to you guys. I can't say for sure. I make a recommendation that at minimum you should sit down and see whether or not it makes sense for you. But up to you.
It depends. Caroline.
Well, I think it's very personal. Some people are very comfortable to make these updates themselves, and some people feel very confident and think it's okay, and other people want nothing to do with it and want someone to do it for them. And I think that's a really just a personal decision that each business owner has to make when you're in business, right? Like, I'm never going to go on the back end of my website because it scares me. So I hire someone to do that, but there's some things I will do by myself.
Absolutely.
So Jamie's not going to plug herself, so I feel like we should, right? If you're scared of lawyers, or if you think they cost too much money, like most of us have both of those fears, I would strongly recommend that you do contact Jamie at #legal. They're actually not scary. It's the one lawyer besides my wife, I have to preface that I'm willing to talk to about legal stuff and not be scared of. I'm working on it. So yeah, you should definitely, I think, consult an attorney before you go ahead and just kind of copy and paste a privacy policy that you don't necessarily know what it means, which I know a lot of people want to kind of do it themselves. And these are legal terms, and these are actually, do we even cover this? What are the consequences if you do not comply with CCPA?
Yeah,
it's true.
So
sorry, Jenny, to steal the questions.
Yeah, no.
Okay,
If there's a AG cause of action for an intentional, and intentional and non-intentional, you'd have to talk about how they are applied. But for each violation, for an intentional is $7,500 for each one, and $2,500 for unintentional for each violation. So like every data sale, you just don't want that to happen. And then the private causes of action, they're a little bit lower. It's in the hundreds of dollars, but also the same. But the AG's office is really the one who has, but you also don't want to get caught up in a private litigation on this stuff if you don't have to.
It's going to be rough to make content and advance work on updating old content or SEO if you're in a lawsuit because you violated a CCPA. So that is a thing that I'm going to say, we don't have to discuss exact rates, but Jamie, it would probably be less money to contact you and get a accurate privacy policy rather than get sued.
Probably. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
and that's $7,500 per. I'm sorry. Did you say
violation per
violation?
For
so if they found that you violated, 50,000 users' rights, would it be 50,000 times 7,500?
Each time you violate. So each time you collect someone's personal information and they didn't want you to, or you weren't complying. Yeah. It's not pretty.
That's rough.
It's a large number. That
is a large number. Yeah.
Okay. Carol Ann says, Jamie, expect an email from me. All right, Carol Ann. Christine Cook says, Jamie, do you only work with U.S. residents?
I work with residents outside of the U.S. who need to comply with U.S. law. So I'm licensed in the U.S. I have a California lawyer actually that's on my staff. And so we help people who are looking for help with U.S. law. So I can help you if you're outside the U.S., but you need help with U.S. law.
Right. Greg Smith says, how do we get a toll-free number? Greg, I don't think Jamie does that. But
that's a great question.
It's a good question. And I think, I feel like Google, we can Google around and maybe post in the comments here. Jill Hassel says, Jamie's the best and she's not scary. Jill, I think that depends upon if you need her to be scary, she is scary. Elizabeth
She's
Barbone,
on your side. She's not scary.
I'm scary on your behalf.
Elizabeth Barbone says, Jamie is fabulous. She is. You're right.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Thomas Williams says, for bloggers who collect nothing more than an email address, is this relevant?
Well, an email address is personal information. So if you meet one of those other 3 factors, yes.
Yes. So the answer is yes. Okay. Getting all those questions. I think we have everything answered. We've posted the blog post. We've got all the resources there for you in the comment thread. And then I just want to make a quick announcement, which is winter is coming, aka Q1. Are you ready for it? Do not fear. Our final episode of Teal Talk for 2019 and the decade is next Thursday, December 12th. And I've got Mediavine co-founder Amber Bracegirdle and our VP of Ad Ops, Brad Hagman, coming by to discuss all things Q1 prep and readiness to help the drop hurt less for you. So that is next Thursday. We will be promoting it and talking about it. Get all your Q1 questions together. Oh, Andrew Wilder said, Jamie's been very scary on my behalf. She rocks. Good way to put it, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
Anything else from either Eric or Jamie? before we sign off? No, that's just silence. So that means no. No.
Are you looking for us or are you looking for
I
the
said,
comment?
well, either. Do you guys have anything? I apologize. I was still listening.
I'm glad both of us are here, because otherwise
you're both just like this. Just staring at me with just a blank smile. But they were pleasant smiles, so I didn't feel attacked. Do you guys have anything additional you'd like to add?
Don't panic. It'll be okay. There's good information. This is going to be changing. Like, it's not like, we're all getting sued on January 1st. Just like take it step by step, do your audit. If you definitely don't need to freak out. Your service providers absolutely should start providing you with information. Remember, this just passed. The regulations aren't even done yet. Mediavine is so on top of stuff. They're just so ahead of the game. Others are going to follow suit. So I just say, exactly like we said with GDPR, we don't need to panic. You can put something in place and everybody's going to be okay.
Yeah, on that point, I do want to mention, I know this seems like we always present this stuff to you guys in the 11th hour, like we're giving you 25 days, but literally this is still up for discussion until tomorrow, right? Is what Jamie said. The IAB, I think, didn't even finalize their implementation until a couple of weeks ago. The technology that we use and the SSPs we work with haven't even adopted this yet.
Yeah.
So we are ahead of the game when it comes to these things. It's just, unfortunately, this is the nature of these kind of last minute information that we're given and the ability to act upon it. I promise you, we have been preparing for this, and we will work as quickly as we can to make sure that we get you that CMP before, January 1st. And again, definitely before any enforcement is happening.
Yeah.
And the sky is not falling. Nope. We will be okay.
It's okay. Go back to your Hallmark movie watching, all is well, but also do the things that we're saying and read the blog posts and make sure that you're covered. Thank you so much to my wonderful guests, Eric and Jamie. I very much appreciate you guys stopping by and making everything clear for us.
Trying to.
Thanks.
You did. It was great. Okay. Bye, everyone. We'll see you next Thursday.